these regulations without being optimistic, right? So, because of course it goes both ways around, and actually I have several examples of this, and of course the first thing is you have to have a long-term view, because these processes like the ones we're living in Ecuador or Venezuela, these are like these are moments of learning for our countries, and everybody's learning, and learning sometimes takes you through rough patches, right? And for instance, I remember one day we had an official that came to the Hacienda, and he was saying, how do we close down the distillery? He had this reason to close down the distillery, and we were in a meeting. I was in a meeting with a few people, and the director of production walks into our meeting around 6:30 p.m. with a face as if the sky had fallen on his head, and he said, "We're doomed. Esto se acabó. You know, this finished." And I said, what happened? Well, these officials came and with the National Guard, and they want to turn off the distillery. So he wanted to jump in, right, to explain everything. I said, wait, no, stop, 1 second, sit down. No, but this is urgent, I have to go back. No, sit down, just 5 minutes, sit down. So he finally sat down. Of course, he was very sort of like, I don't want to sit down. And I said, can you please tell us a joke? and so it's like, come on. I don't have time for a joke. And say, no, we need a joke. I don't want to hear anything about it. If you want, you go back. But if you want to tell me about what's happening, tell me a joke. So anyway, he was mad about it, but he came up with a joke.
Was it a good joke?
It was a fantastic joke. I can't remember right now. I was asking him the other day, can you remind me of this joke? So anyway, of course, with everybody nervous and everybody a little tense with the situation, when he told this joke, everybody cracked up and had a real laugh. And when that happened, I said, okay, now we're in the right mood for you to tell me what's happening. So he told me what was happening, and so we said, okay, so how do we turn this into an opportunity? So then we sort of thought about it a little while, and about an hour later we went back. We talked to this official. We said, look, we can't turn this off right now because it's a process. It takes a few days. We'll turn it off if you actually think it's the right thing to do. But so anyway, this turned into actually a huge opportunity. Well, this official still is one of our biggest allies, right? So I say this because many times when you're facing a situation like this, one reacts as an adversary, as a foe to the person who's in front, instead of saying, how can we turn this into something better? What can I learn from this person? What can I teach? How can we build? And like this, for instance, I remember when at a certain stage they changed the policy on exports, where 90% of the exchange of the currency, sorry, how do you say that? Divisas.
Currency, yeah.
Of the currency from proceeds of exports had to be sold to the central bank at the official exchange rate. Of course, when it was 6 was the official and 8 was the extra official, well, it wasn't that bad. But 90% had to be sold at the official exchange rate. You were losing those 2/3 on each dollar that you're selling to the central bank. But now, just to give you an idea, the exchange rate, the difference is huge. The official exchange rate is, I think, 3,000 or something like that, and the real exchange rate is almost 200,000, right? So of course you would lose your shirt. Now, all of this, when we started pounding away at the different officials in the government, listen, why is the policy to exterminate exports? No, that's not the policy. Well, of course it's not the official policy, but that is the real policy. And we kept on doing this, and instead of confronting them, we started building spaces to actually build a new policy for exports. It took a long time. You have to be very patient. And just recently we were able to change the law, and now 80% of the divisas the exporter can keep. Only 20% has to be sold to the central bank. And of course now you've got exports that are taking off again. So I think the attitude is, that's why I was saying chicken and egg, because if your attitude is these idiots are doing the wrong thing, well, maybe they're doing the wrong thing, maybe they're not idiots. That's one of the big things that one has to understand. Maybe they're doing the wrong thing, but then if your attitude is positive, you actually have a chance of building something different with the same people that put that rule in. Right? So that's the way we see things.
Fantastic. So I think we are, Álvaro is already giving me the eye, but so yeah, I mean, so thanks so much. I think we learned a lot. So long-term vision, flexible focus, and being constructive, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so that was probably the most positive panel I ever had. I love it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much to you. Thank you.
I also would like to applaud
Gracias,
Irene
Irene.
Mia for fantastic job as well.
Irene Mia.
Well done. Okay, I'm gonna ask you to remain seated. We're going to continue with the last panel of the day. We're gonna start the last panel of the day, and I'd like to invite the members of the panel. Director General Daniel Calleja, Susan Nicolai, Patricia Majluf, Oliver Sartor, and Isabel Hilton.
Hay más. ¿Nos plantamos aquí? Sí. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Irene Mia asked Alberto if he wanted to run for politics. I'm going to ask Alberto if he wants to be an academic. The 3 secrets of survival, very, very useful. One correction, wake up and smell the coffee. It has to be Colombian coffee, of course, for that to work. It is an honor for me to welcome our participants in this panel. Our title is a little bit more, in the words of Alberto, not so optimistic, but also with hope. It's called Resilient States, Resilient Societies. And I'm honored to introduce you to Director General of Environment at the European Commission, Mr. Daniel Calleja, Susan Nicolai, who is a Senior Research Fellow in Growth, Poverty and Inequality at ODI, Patricia Majluf, who is the Vice President of Oceana, Peru, based in Lima, Oliver Sartor, who is a Senior Research Fellow for Climate and Energy and IDDRI in Paris, and my good friend Isabel Hilton, who is the editor and founder of China Dialogue. As you have seen that there is an important element on the environment as well, but also in terms of development, which are very important areas for us in international relations, but also in government for us to address, especially because they need a long-term view. So resilience is extremely important, especially for these 2 particular areas. Our speakers will speak each 12 minutes. I will make sure that's the case. And we will have a chance for you to ask questions at the end. So we're going to start with Director General Daniel. Welcome to the LSE. You're welcome to stay seated there, or you can speak from here. Whatever you prefer.
Like maybe from here.
Excellent.
It's easier. Well, good morning. It is a great pleasure to be here in the LSE to participate in this 5th annual conference. It is a great pleasure also to see our friends from CAF, and in particular my good friend Guillermo, and also I have to say I enjoyed very much the previous panel, because I think to bring the hopes and the opportunities of entrepreneurship is very important. I don't know if our panel is going to be so optimistic, because when you look at resilience, when you look at the challenges that we have, we also have to send a message of awareness. And we also have to look, as it has been said, at a long-term perspective. And it is in that context that resilience comes into play. Let me share what is the EU vision on resilience, and then I would like to cover how do we feel that we can bring a good response to the challenges that we are facing. Now, resilience is at the heart of the policy of the European Union, and we believe if we want to have a sustainable future, we need to integrate this concept. Now, what is resilience? I was looking it in the Oxford Pocket Dictionary, and it says it's a physical concept. It has to do with elasticity. But this physical concept has now got a more interesting meaning, because I think resilience is more about encompassing all individuals and the whole of society. It is about democracy. It is about trust in institutions. It is about sustainable development. And it is about the capacity to reform so that we can adapt to the challenges of the future. And what are these challenges? Well, I think when you look at the global trends, the global trends paint a picture which is not very optimistic. And let me explain why. Global population will reach 8.5 billion people by 2030. The proportion of people living in urban areas in the world will be 66% by 2050. 2 out of 3 people will be living in cities. 50% of these cities have not yet been built. So we are going to see a major trend of migration from the rural areas to the cities. We are going to see the impact of climate change, which is a global threat, which we are already seeing every day. We have also positive developments because middle classes are going to grow, but we expect there will be 5 billion people in the middle class by 2030 across the world, but the pressure on resources and services is going to increase even more. We have never consumed more resources than today, and we have never wasted more resources than today. And I will give you just a figure. China, between 2011 and 2013, has consumed more cement than the United States during the 20th century. So this shows that we are in a model, in a linear economic model. If we continue doing things in the same way, we are not going to be able to meet the needs of the future population in the planet. And the present model is not sustainable. One planet will not be enough to meet the needs of humankind. This is why resilience is so important, because we have to connect the management of natural resources, of ecosystem services, of sustainable and socially inclusive economic growth. We have to take care of our land, of our nature, of our oceans, of our water, of our biodiversity, because they are essential to support our social and economic well-being. And this is not just an environmental issue. This is also a question of survival. Now, the question is, how do you do so and at the same time ensure economic prosperity and economic development? Because we have to ensure it. And I would like to say from the European Union that we don't believe that it is impossible to do this. Or in other words, that we can reconcile economic growth with environmental protection. A carbon-free and growing world is possible. And you will say, how? Well, let me share with you how. The European Union believes that we have to embrace the concept of the circular economy. This is what we propose as the best way to meet the challenges of the future. If we continue with the linear model of produce, consume, and throw away, this is not going to work. when we extract our resources, when we produce, when we consume, and when we recycle, we need to maximize the use of resources, to keep the resources the more than we can in the economic cycle, and we need to minimize waste. And it is possible to do so. And if we do so, we will be able to manage more efficiently the limited resources that we have on Earth. And we have no better way of doing so. This is why the circular economy is an imperative. We need to go in this direction, because by closing the loop, by being more efficient, by saving when we produce, when we reuse, when we recycle, we will be able to be more effective in meeting the challenges ahead. But it is not just a question of an imperative, of a need. It is also a great opportunity. And here is when the concept becomes really interesting. The circular economy can produce savings for European companies, which we have estimated in 600 billion euros, because companies will be more efficient in the use of raw materials. They will make savings in energy, and by recycling, they will be able to improve their benefits. They can innovate, they can reinvest, they can grow, and they can create jobs. And we will be protecting our resources. The circular economy is about innovation. It is about entrepreneurship. It is about industry. It is about also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We could cut them up to 4% every year. And remanufacturing alone can reduce greenhouse gas emissions up to 50% over new products. All the sectors are concerned, from SMEs to entrepreneurs, across all the life cycles and across all the value chains. And it is not just industrial manufacturing. When you are thinking at the collaborative economy, it is about making the resources last more, use them more efficiently, and create new opportunities. Let me share with you some examples, and I think this will link with the previous panel. 2 days ago, the Commission presented its initiative on plastics. You may have read about it in the papers. If we do nothing, by 2050, there will be more plastics than fish in the seas. I am now, and in Europe, we are producing 25.8 million tons of plastic waste, and only 1/3 of this waste is collected for recycling. And between 75,000 and 300 tons of microplastics are released into the environment each year in the EU, and they end in the seas. 80% of the fish and of the birds in the North Sea have microplastics. We are finding microplastics even in the drinking water. What do we do in order to meet this challenge? We have to improve recycling. We have to do a serious plan to curb plastic waste. We have to introduce restrictions to single-use plastics. We need to innovate. We need to harness global action, but we need also to count on entrepreneurs. And I will mention 2 examples. A Spanish company called Ecoalf. Ecoalf was fishing fish. They no longer fish fish. They fish plastics. They take the plastics for recycling, and they produce clothes. They produce all sorts. So an environmental challenge is transformed into an economic opportunity. I have another example which inspired me a lot. A company came to see me in one of these events. I go from time to time, and they said, the name of our company is Sea2Sea. The sea, the ocean, to sea. I said, what is this? They are taking the plastics from the seas, and they are producing glasses. So the circular economy is a concept of economic development. It's a concept of growth. It's a concept of entrepreneurship. It has an environmental dimension. It has a strong social and entrepreneurial dimension. It has to be part of the industrial strategy for Europe, but it is also a very good way of creating sustainable jobs for the future. Another example I could give concerns water. We all know the problems of water. Many people say, well, this is a problem for Africa, for Asia, for developing countries. Around 11% of European population nowadays is facing water scarcity, and by 2030, half of Europe's watersheds will be affected. And we know that behind water scarcity and desertification, we are seeing wars. Behind the war in Syria, there was a serious drought which provoked migration, leading to tensions which resulted in the war. We need to work more in reused water. Only 5% of all of the water are reused right now. And we need to share this technology, share it with developing countries, and work, because behind this there are also great opportunities. And it is, as a scarce resource, something which we have to do. We could replace fresh water, which is now used in agriculture, with reused water and bring economic benefits. And these are also great opportunities. All this is linked to a global agenda where the Sustainable Development Goals come into play. For the first time, the world has an agenda till 2030 with an economic, a social, and environmental dimension. Circular economy solutions can be implemented at a global scale across all value chains. And here is also where the South dimension comes into place. For developing countries, improving the environmental sustainability of their economies is as important as for the developed ones, because the costs of further environmental degradation will lock them further into poverty. So it is important already to start with sustainable practices that can deliver multiple economic benefits. The European Union is providing a lot of assistance in this area, 2 billion euros till 2020 for actions and projects related to environment or climate in developing countries. Let me mention the switch to green initiative. We need to mobilize all the resources with the financial institutions, with CAF, with the EIB, in order to ensure this transition to a low-carbon, resilient, circular economy. And green finances, green bonds are increasingly important. Shift away from fossil fuel investments and move to the sustainable finances which are required for the future. 13 trillion US dollars is the cost which is needed to achieve the Paris objectives. We need to mobilize these finances, we need the private sector, we need entrepreneurs, and we will need increased assistance in development aid. And in this context, we are also conducting circular economy missions. I am pleased because CAF has participated. The European Union is going with third countries. We are promoting engagement between companies to identify circular economy solutions, increasing cooperation in the environment, and finding mutual opportunities. And I know I am exceeding my time, so I will conclude with a final message, because I don't want to make the moderator angry, and I'm seeing that all my colleagues want to come in. So, one key message. And the key message is a message of confidence. The challenges are very serious, but we can meet these challenges. But in order to do that, we can only envisage our future prosperity and a healthy environment if we go towards an innovative circular economy where nothing is wasted. We need to go to a zero-waste society where every waste is a wasted opportunity, where natural resources are managed sustainably, where biodiversity is protected, valued, and restored to enhance our society's resilience.